We've got something really different and really exciting for you today. And we're just going to give some time to get some traction. But this is obviously recorded, it'll go up later for everybody to watch. But I invite you to ask some questions. I'm not doing any free readings in this one, but we're going to talk about solar flares. How does that affect you? And or all of us. And also, we're going to talk about 5D. I have been feeling very off and strange. Today's actually the best so far. Knock on my head, wood that I've been feeling for a while, for about 3 days, and it was I was telling a friend, it was like a boil that didn't want to turn into a pimple. It was like I wasn't really sick, but I felt like I was about to be sick. But nothing really happened. Had all those underlying stuff. So I was talking to another friend of mine who I've known for about 10 years, but we haven't actually met in real life. But we've known each other for 10 years. We were colleagues quite a while ago. And he started talking to me about the solar flares, which I'm really starting to get quite fascinated in. And I mean, this has been studied for quite some time. Solar flares are a real thing. It's not woo woo, but they do have an effect on our energy and possibly the magnetic energy around the earth. So we're going to get on that chat right away. Anybody have any questions, even if it has nothing to do with solar flares or 5D? I'm going to sort of give my take on what I've been told by source that 5D is, and it's actually in my book, 101 Answers from the Universe. But just hang in there because we're going to get some really juicy, exciting stuff going on here. And I think it's going to help all of you understand this energy. One of the things that I warn all of my clients, I'm going to warn you guys, is that when you're feeling this energy, try really hard not to place hold it. That means try not to label it. Often we'll say, well, it's my boss, it's my work, it's my husband, it's my children, it's everything that's going on in the world right now. And we try to blame that. That's why I'm anxious. That's why I'm upset. That's why I feel mad. That's why I feel um, sadness, etc. And just sort of look internally and say, well, what is it going on? What's going on with me? What is this triggering within me? Because I find right now there's a huge blame game going on in this world. We're pointing fingers at each other and it's getting us nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. It's smoke and mirrors, people. So I'm going to introduce to you my very good friend Jay. And Jay, the first thing I want to ask you about, like when you said solar flares, and you've said this to me a few times before. First of all, if you can explain what a solar flare is technically and how often these affect us and what does it do? Like, how does it affect us or how does it affect you?
Sure. Yeah. And believe it or not, Holly, we've known each other since 2007. I was just thinking about that. So a
Oh
little
my
more than 10
God. That is a long time. That's even longer than I thought.
years. So solar flares are basically it's part of the natural sun cycle. So every like 12 to 13 years, the sun goes through a natural cycle where it has maximums and minimums. And right now, we're moving through what they believe to be the start of the next solar maximum. So, when this happens, the sun starts getting what's called sunspots, which are dark spots on the surface of the sun. And now they actually have, orbiting satellites that are constantly observing the sun. You can go to websites like solar or spaceweather.com, and you can view the images of the actual sun. They're taking pictures of it every day. So these
Mhm,
sunspots are basically like storms. If you think of it like a hurricane on the Earth,
mhm,
except some of these storms are obviously even bigger than the Earth. Um, and so it's basically just a disturbance in the energy of the sun, and if it makes a big enough disturbance, it cooks up a vortex of energy, kind of like a tornado on the Earth. But in the sun's case, since it's all liquid plasma, it explodes out. And then that's what's called a flare, but it's also called a CME, which is a mass ejection, because the flare is actually the energy itself coming out of the sun, and then the CME is the plasma that comes along with it. So
Mhm.
sometimes we just get hit with the energy, which is the flaring, and then sometimes we actually get hit with the actual plasma. So when the plasma actually hits the shield of the earth, we have a magnetic shield around the earth that protects us from most of the radiation from outer space and the sun and things like that. But that's what creates the aurora, the aurora borealis, is usually energy coming from the sun and interacting
Hmm.
with our magnetic shield.
Mhm.
So when this happens, it causes, effects upon the earth and ourselves. It can alter the weather on the earth. There's a lot of evidence now that shows that it also increases earthquake activity. And as far as we're concerned, it can cause all kinds of things. It's, because it affects our electromagnetic energy within our body, and it can cause heart palpitations, dizziness. And and in some cases, it's believed to even possibly have caused some people that go into cardiac arrest. Um, Especially, it affects a lot of people that travel uh, in airplanes a lot, because the higher up you
Mhm.
are, the more of it you're going to get, because you're not as protected from the atmosphere.
Wow.
So it's something that I started tracking probably around 2012, when I started
Mhm.
becoming more and more aware of it. And we, like in 2017, we had a really massive flare that happened. Not it was close to when the solar eclipse happened, believe it or not. But it was, because they have different classifications of these flares. So most of the time we're getting them, and they're not anything. They just kind of reflect off of the magnetic shield. We might get an electromagnetic storm. It could cause some temporary radio outages and things like that. But there are sometimes when, they're very powerful. There was an event that happened in the 1800s, not long after we first started using telegraph, and it burned out a whole lot of, the telegraph wires and things like that at the time. Well, the danger of that is, if we ever get another one that's that big or bigger, um, it could very easily knock out all of our technology really quickly.
Mhm.
So that's, a primary concern right now, is that most of our power grid isn't shielded for this kind of thing. And, it would knock out satellites and things like that first, but, it could uh, theoretically wipe out the entire, technological age. So it's a pretty big concern, but it also affects, humans a lot. And I think
Mhm.
it's it there is some evidence that the sun cycles are connected to different evolutionary patterns within humanity. Like, if you really track it over centuries, and you can see these patterns of where cultures emerge, they reach their pinnacle, and then they subside or disappear and things like that. And it seems to be somewhat connected to the sun cycles. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I mean, there is a YouTube channel that I watch frequently. He's been doing
Mhm.
this for a very long time, called Suspicious Observers.
Mhm.
If anybody's interested, but he's all about the sun stuff, and he really goes into it. Now, he's unfortunately predicting that there could be a really catastrophic event within our lifetime. So he's been urging people to actually prep and, prepare for the possibility, because, you're going to possibly want a vehicle that's older that wouldn't be wiped out with a solar flare and things like that. So,
Mhm.
um, and there's also evidence that the magnetic poles of the earth are starting to wobble.
Yep.
And our magnetic shield is a lot weaker right now than it's ever been.
Yep.
So when we get hit with these solar flares, it's affecting us a lot more than it ever has, because the magnetic shield of the earth continues to weaken.
So I just
But
want to remind
yeah,
everybody
go ahead.
that the magnetic field that we have around our Earth is a very real thing. I talked about this quite a lot. They do have um, I never can find out exactly what the terminology is, but they do have machinery on the planet that can calculate the magnetic field all the time, and they tested it. Well, it's always being documented and tested, so they looked at it about during when 9/11 was evident to the world to see
Yeah.
if it shifted because everybody in the world might have shifted their energy, and they had seen that it actually shifted 4 hours before 9/11, so
Right.
that the event so that people already knew, or the people that had been planning it already knew, and it was already creating this global magnetic shift. And people forget that, we have it's a magnetic is sort of, well, I guess it's like an electricity, energy, and we have that around our heart, we have that around our brain, we have that around our body. I mean, some
Right.
scientists may not agree about the body part, but they're not going to deny the brain and the heart part. That's why we can use
Oh,
electric shock to shock our brain or shock our heart to come back.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and these fields are basically like a torus shape, like a donut shape, like they're projecting energy that kind of goes out and comes back in. And
Mhm.
that's what it looks like on the Earth too.
Mm,
If you look at the magnetic field of the Earth, it looks like kind of two bubbles going out on either side of it, and
mm,
it, the crazy part about it is a lot of the ancient Egyptian imagery of the beetles, the scarab beetles with their wings out, looks
mhm.
almost exactly like the magnetic shield of the Earth. So it's interesting what the ancient cultures were aware of, so far back. But
So what's going on now? Like, because you had said, you're feeling off for a few days, and I'm feeling
yeah,
off for a few days. So what kind of solar energy is happening
well,
right now, and how long is it
in
around
the
for?
last week or so, we've had a few hits. And about, I think it was Tuesday, we actually got hit with a CME, which was the actual plasma.
Wow.
So that caused a pretty big geomagnetic storm, and there were pretty big auroras up north. Which I'm assuming you've seen the aurora since you live pretty far up north.
Well, as when you're in the city, you don't see them as much, right? Because of the light reflection of the city. But I have, however, I'm really excited. We're going to go very far north, sometime in the summer, and that's when you see all the colors.
Yeah,
I've seen it sort of whitish, kind of whitish and a little bit bluish, and you could see it moving in the sky, like it's undeniable. But I haven't seen the brilliant colored ones, which if we go to the Northern Territories, we're going to see it there.
right. I've never seen it. I've always wanted to see it, but I'm
It's
sure it's
pretty cool.
amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
We're kind of in an uptick cycle right now. The sun is definitely picking up, and but I think the reason we're feeling it even more is because, like I said, the magnetic shield of the Earth is weakening, and it's at its weakest point since they've started measuring it.
Mhm.
Um, and all of this is verifiable. I mean, you can look it up on the
Yeah.
NASA websites or the scientific websites. It's spaceweather.com is a great resource to view a lot of this stuff. Um, but it's connected to the magnetic pole reversal of the Earth. So right now, magnetic north has been steadily moving south, and
Mhm.
right now it's somewhere in Siberia.
Mm,
Magnetic south is moving in the opposite direction. So what that tells us is that, and this is something that has happened repeatedly throughout the
mhm,
history and the cycles of the Earth. They have a lot of evidence to back it up that the magnetic poles of the Earth have flipped on several occasions. It's pretty much within a cycle of so many thousand years.
mhm.
And right now we're overdue. We're actually a few thousand years overdue for a magnetic pole flip. So if that happens, um, it will temporarily possibly reduce our magnetic shield to zero until the poles totally flip, and then the magnetic shield reactivates. So in that interim, we are really exposed to, solar energy and other types of radiation coming from outer space.
Mm.
So that would make, not only us vulnerable, but our technology vulnerable. Um,
Well, yeah. And from what I understand, it's quite chaotic. It's not really that predictable, magnetic
right.
field changes.
What they do know is that there is a tipping point. So, they're predicting that it's going to be a slow migration up until a certain point, and then it will
Mhm,
just happen like a switch. Just
mhm.
like when you put two like actual physical magnets together, you could push it closer and closer until a certain point, and then it's going to flip and they'll jump right next to each other, attach each other. So that's kind of the same thing. Is it will eventually reach a tipping point. We don't really know exactly when that happens. Most of today's scientists are saying it's still, several hundred years away,
Yeah,
which is possible.
yeah.
But we don't know. So
Does how we treat our Earth, and our atmosphere affect the strength of the magnetic field?
I don't know. I don't know that there's any evidence to support that. I don't think that there's really been any studies to support that. But I am not a person that looks at the Earth and the sun as just being, uh,
Planets or yeah. Well,
yeah, I
the
don't
sun
see
is a
them as
star,
simply being.
technically.
I don't see them as being inanimate objects. To
Right.
me, if something is that big and that massive and that much energy, it has to be a conscious being.
Right?
That's my perspective.
Yeah. It
So
breathes. Yeah.
exactly. So I believe both the stars and the planets are probably conscious entities that, we just don't know
You
how to
know,
communicate with.
yeah, I love that. Well, as an astrologer, I communicate with them. That's how I see it. However, if we think about it, how can the sun the sun literally breathes or shines consciousness on us.
Right.
We can't live without it. Nothing on the planet can live without it. Photosynthesis, oxygen, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It cannot be without the sun. If the sun disappeared tomorrow, we would all die, and so would the
Right.
planet. So that's a consciousness. Like, how can you deny that that is not a consciousness?
Exactly. So saying that if the earth is a conscious being, I'm sure she can decide what she's going to do if we are being too annoying, if we're polluting her, if we're
Yeah,
making her unpleased with our presence.
yeah.
So, I don't know that there's any studies to back it up, but my gut tells me, yeah, I think it probably plays a big role in it. So,
So everybody's going to feel this dizziness, anxiousness, emotional around the energy. Now, I also believe that whatever the constellation that the sun is going through at that time, that's what astrology is,
yeah.
which right
Hmm.
now it's Aquarius, right? I gotta double
Yeah.
check. Yeah, it's Aquarius. So the energy, and also with the new moon in Aquarius too. So the Aquarius energy is all about humanity. So, and
Right.
humanity is about the collective consciousness. And then you got to kind of look at being a humanitarian as well. So I would think that I'm just kind of playing a game right now, but thinking, would that solar flare sort of bring in the element of humanity? And is this why humanity is at odds with each other right now? We're at a war with each other right now. I mean, whatever that belief system is, whatever side of the track you're on, whether it is political or um, pharmaceutical or medical or whatever, everybody seems to be there seems to be this divide right now in humanity. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this solar flare, can this affect that negatively, or can it affect it positively, or nothing at all?
I think it could be both. So while it is scary to think about these things because, nobody wants to be the doomsday thinker, but I don't necessarily think it's all doom and gloom. And I think that basically it could be a situation where it's going to bring out and amplify whatever you are. So if
Mm,
you're a loving, empathetic, caring person, it's going to amplify that within you. But if you're the opposite of that, it might amplify the negative.
mm,
Um, because I think the sun, that's its primary goal is amplifier.
mhm.
It gives us everything. It's abundance, but abundance can go either way. It can be too much of a good thing or too much of a bad thing.
Okay, well, that makes sense to me. So, what's going to happen now then? Anyone who's really in fear or anger or frustration or feeling isolated or lost, sort of all the negative sides of everything going on now, then it would accentuate that. And anyone who's feeling optimistic or feels this should be about peace and unity and love, then it's going to accentuate that.
Right.
Maybe that's why all of this convoy stuff is going on around the world. It's become viral, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got my own personal views on what's going on with all of that. I kind of think I'll, I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of distractions. Let's just say that there's a lot of
A lot of
distractions in the
smoke and
world right
mirrors.
now.
Yeah, a lot of
Bec-
smoke and mirrors.
because they
Um,
don't want you to be aware. A lot of, I say they, but it's a very small fraction of people that just happen to have most of the power on this planet. But you
yep,
know, they want to keep you asleep. They want to keep you unaware of what's really going on. And
yeah,
it's because it's all about control. They're afraid of losing control. If we
yeah,
actually all woke up to our natural abilities and our, you know, pardon the phrase, God-given right to be
yeah,
who we truly are, they would have no control over us. And I kind of think that
yeah.
the solar stuff connects back to, the fifth density stuff. I think it's
That's
going
what I
to
was
be
gonna ask you next. What do you
yeah,
mean by fifth? Because fifth density, fifth dimension, the
right.
same thing, right?
Pretty
And what
much.
what
Yeah.
dimension are we in now, according to you? I have my own.
Third, I assume.
Yep, we're third. That's right. Yeah, in my book, it goes from 1 to 3, uh,
I
4,
mean,
5, 6, and then 7, 8,
we're
9.
third with a taste of the fourth because you
Yep,
could call time the fourth dimension,
yep,
but um, you know, but it kind of depends on what reference you're looking at as to whether it's called dimension or density. Um,
yep,
but so according to one source that I've been listening to lately, they claim that everything outside of the Earth is fifth density, and that the Earth is specifically in a 3D artificial matrix, um,
yep,
and that it is done that way because of a war that happened thousands of years ago, and it was
mhm,
intended to be a place for traumatized souls to rebuild themselves and to
mhm,
reacclimate themselves back into the universe at large. But, according to this source, uh, it was kind of hijacked. And so it's not going the way it should go because the Matrix is basically supposed to work off of the law of attraction, as a lot of us are aware of. And it's
yeah,
supposed to give you what you desire. But the ones that have hijacked it have figured out how to trick us into creating the world that they want instead of the world that we want.
ooh,
And they
okay,
do that.
that one hit me. That one hit me. I felt like a
Okay.
huge opening in my heart chakra. So they want us to live in a world that they created rather than in a world that we created.
They
So I
trick
would
us.
go yeah,
Yeah.
trick us. Yeah, because well,
They
we have
trick
a
us into
brain.
using our creative power, our
Yeah,
collective creative power to create what they feed us. And so they're feeding us. What are they feeding us? They're feeding us fear. They're feeding us violence. They're feeding us, division, and all of these negative things daily through
yeah,
our news, our TV, our movies.
Yeah.
and so they do that because the more that we think about the negative and the more we fascinate on it and focus on it, we're creating it, which
Mhm.
allows them to maintain control. Um, Now, I mean, according to this one source, they claim that even our short lifespans were artificially implanted upon us because we've
Mm.
basically been brainwashed to believe we're going to grow old and die, and
Mhm.
so it happens.
Well, you know
I
what?
don't know that we can back that up. I know it's hard to prove these things, but it's an
Well,
interesting
no.
concept.
I mean, there's, when there's a movie that came out, or a book, I guess, that came out, called The Blue Zones. And the Blue Zones at that time was 5 places in the world where there was the most centenarians, so people lived the longest. And one of them, just an island off of Japan, I never can
Hmm.
say that island, but Akawashawa, something like this. You can look it up. It's a small amount of people on an island, and most of them live to be 120, 120, 110, 120
Yeah,
average age to live. And I believe it's because they're on this island. They live a very, very simple life. The Japanese, they very rarely leave the island. They don't know any other way. Nothing is telling them that they shouldn't live that long in
right.
their environment. They grew up being very close to their great 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 grandmother, and their great great great
Well,
aunt.
yeah, and the thing is, I mean, we have written documents from ancient history of people living to be 1,000 or more years old. Like
Mhm,
the Sumerian tablets have a list of kings, and some of them lived 20 to 30,000 years, according to this list. Now, people want to say that's fantasy. It was a religion. It was just something that, yeah, but we don't. That doesn't really jive with me because these were official documents. Like, it wasn't just like a storybook. These were, these clay tablets were supposed to be like, like something that we would keep at the White House, in our day and time, like
mhm,
official political documentation of things that actually happened. But today, everybody wants to pretend like that didn't happen. There was no such era where people lived to be thousands of years old. But I'm not so sure.
mhm,
I think that I think we're dealing with two different worlds. I think there was a world that existed before 12,000 years ago, before the so-called Great Flood and whatever caused that to
mhm.
happen, and then the world that we've been in ever since. Um, and something happened, and I think that the ancient stories each have a little piece of truth in them. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh well, I totally believe this one or I totally believe that one, but if you piece them all together, you start to get a bigger picture.
Well, one of the things is, you can look it up in heritagedaily.com. And archaeologists have already proven that there's been 5 mass extinctions.
Hmm.
And some say 6, because some want to include um, Samaria. Oh my gosh, I can't think of it right now.
Atlantis.
What's the area that's under the sea right now that they say Atlantis, yeah.
Atlantis, yeah.
So some believe that Atlantis is a 6th one, and some say it's not. And they say that we're headed towards our 6th or 7th extinction.
Right.
And that's archaeologically proven that
Yeah.
we've gone through extinction. So yeah, this isn't the only time that humans have been on this planet. And some of them proved, Greg Braden, who's a geologist,
Oh
and
yeah,
an
I love Greg.
archaeologist, yeah, they found, and you can look it up, everybody listening. Uh, Not only recently, the last 10 years, they're able to go to the abyss of the sea and dig below the sea surface. It's the furthest they've ever been able to go with certain types of machinery in in our existence. And they dug up this cog that was made out of a metal that they can't even like it was deep buried into some stone, so they had to break it up. And also a computer chip. And they say
Wow.
this is like billions of years old. And it's modern technology actually made with certain types of material that don't even exist on the earth. But this is not what we hear in history. You know, we all know
No.
that our history books are lying, and our history books don't
Well,
tell us
that's
what we
just
should
like
know.
they won't let go of this fiction that the Great Pyramids were built as tombs for pharaohs when there's never been a body found in any of them. There's never been
Yeah.
any evidence that they were used as a burial tomb. Um, all the burial tombs were all hidden out in the desert underground. So that's obviously not what the pyramids were for. And I
No,
don't
and it
really personally think that they were even built by what we know of as the ancient Egyptians. I think they predate
no,
them
no,
by a long shot. So,
no. I watched this documentary years ago, and I had just a discussion not too long ago with a friend. We're talking about the statues on Easter Island, and
yeah,
she was like, "Oh yeah, of course they just moved them. And they used like you know bro- trees and they would roll it and that's how they moved them." I said, first of all, I watched a whole documentary on that one and the pyramids. So the documentary took used computer animated and with science and engineers, everything, and they tried to replicate physically replicate how they could move these statues from one location to the other one and put them in the order that they were in. And they couldn't do it. And they tried, like they would have 30, 40, 50 people, and they put them on these tree trunks that were, tipped over so that they could roll it. They could not move these things. The other thing was they've done with engineering and, like I said, computer technology to several ways of how these giant bricks that literally weigh tons that each that build the pyramid, how they were able, and they even tried like what if it was filled with water, they could float it, and no, they couldn't figure it out. Now, and some of the material that is made out of does not exist on our planet.
right.
But people
Yeah.
don't know that. We don't learn that in history. You have to
No,
watch the documentary to know.
it's amazing what we've lost in history and what we used to know. But so, I mean, I have always a history person. I find it fascinating, especially the hidden history of everything.
Yeah,
But to focus more on the present and what we're currently going through,
yeah,
I think that, like you and I were talking about, if we are moving into fifth dimension or
yeah.
fifth density,
What does that mean?
and yeah, so based off of what I understand about it so far, it's a realm where everything is a lot more connected than it is here. So the 3D
Mhm,
realm, we've all been isolated. We're crammed into these bodies that are cut off. We're meant to believe everything is like plasticized and physical and apart from us and separate. And that's you, and this is me, and that's a bed, and that's a chair. But in
mhm,
fifth dimension, it's a lot the boundaries are a lot more blurry. So as
mhm.
I understand it, like if you were fully immersed in it, you could have a body if you chose to have one and experience that, but you can also choose to not have a body. And you can go back and forth, and it's like you're swimming in an ocean of consciousness. So there is a piece of it that is
Oh,
you, but then you can also be part of the whole totality of it. And in that realm, everything is much more, you know, uh, you feel it. You feel everything. You're connected to everything. Um, so if we're slowly transitioning into that, I would expect that we're going to have to go through these different levels of it because you can't just rip off the band-aid and jump into it. It's like jumping into a freezing cold pool, swimming pool or something. Um, so you kind of have to tiptoe your way into it and slowly acclimate yourself to the water temperature. And, or, imagine that you were a cat that had a million whiskers all over you. Like you would just
Yeah,
feel everything all the time. So
hypersensitivity.
right, and I think that's what a lot of us that are already on the edge of that transition are going through. Like we're experiencing hypersensitivity, anxiety, exhaustion. Like I don't know about you, but it's not just the physical stuff, but it's everything that I see in my mind. I constantly see imagery a lot,
Mhm.
and like I can see energy almost that I didn't used to see. And I get, and it kind of freaks you out when you first notice it or you first experience it, but then you slowly get adjusted to it, and then something new comes along and that freaks you out for a little while until you get adjusted to that. And I kind of feel like it's like that. We're slowly being acclimated to it, but the process is not pleasant from our 3D perspective.
I always use the example of animals with this specifically, well, dogs or cats. Have you ever, or even a baby, have you ever seen a dog or a cat all of a sudden just look up into the
Yeah,
corner of a room
for
and there's
sure.
nothing there? There's no fly, there's no nothing. They're intense, they're just like they're just focused on it. And you're like, what are you looking at? Or
Right.
they hear something, you could
Babies
tell.
do it all the time too.
Babies do it all the time. My daughter used to do it when she was a baby. She used to point up in the corner, and I'd go, what is that?" You know? So, it's there, there's a thin, thin veil. So, what do we do? So, for instance, for me, I'm easily can get panic attacks very easily from an event when I was younger.
Hmm.
And if my body gets startled, in a certain way, my head will go right into this panic attack. And somebody had sent me a video to watch. It was a music soundtrack to a movie called Stand Up. And the song is just profound. And I don't even know if
Hmm.
I could watch the movie because it is about history, Black history, and some of that stuff is just breaks me up, just breaks me apart. I can't handle it emotionally, and it makes me angry. But the song was so intense. I got this, how you get goosebumps all over your body and you're like, "Ooh, that gave me goosebumps." Except this time it was in my whole solar plexus area. And I never had that before. And it was exactly right there. The more that I listened to it, the more on fire my solar plexus was, like, kind of like, yeah, kind of like the shivers, but not exactly the same. I had to turn it off.
Yeah,
I was
for
like, what
sure.
the heck is this doing to
I
me?
I mean, personally, I use music a lot to
Mhm.
help me cope and to help me get through
Okay.
things. Um, I think music and vibration is a perfect tool because I think that the higher dimensions are all about vibration. Um, and
Right.
and I honestly think that we eventually will be able to cure our bodies with sound, with vibration, with because
Mhm.
it's not just so much a sound, but it's an intent. So,
Mhm.
everything gives out a vibration, like like a
Get a
physical
sound bath.
image, a word,
Mhm.
an intention, but a sound bath especially can, and certain frequencies and vibrations, like all over YouTube, there's all kinds of, vibration videos that you can watch with certain frequencies embedded in them.
Yep.
And I use a lot of those. I'll put one on the background while I'm working sometimes.
So is
There's
that a
one.
good so there's certain hertz,
Yeah.
frequencies, yeah, that
So
you
as far
can
as like grounding ourselves, especially like going through what we're going through right now, there are
yeah,
some based off of what's called the Schumann resonance of the Earth,
okay.
which is supposed to be like the heartbeat of the earth that we're all attuned to.
Mhm.
And I like listening to those when I'm feeling anxious, because it helps kind of reground my energy to the earth. Um,
So how do you spell that?
Schumann, and then
Schumann's what?
resonance. What's that?
Schumann's
Schumann resonance.
resonance.
Resonance, I think. I'm not the best speller.
Oh, I know what you're saying now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. Texting. Okay. That's cool. I like that. Okay, so what I always tell people when they say, "How do I know it's not me? How do I know it's something that's happening outside of me?" First of all, your body knows. So you can say to your body, if this is not mine, take it away or let it go through you out into the universe, out the top of your head. Um, or if you didn't feel like that 5 minutes ago, and all of a sudden,
Mhm.
for no reason, you're feeling something intense, it's not you.
Right.
It's coming from somewhere else and you're broadcasting it. We're all broadcasters and we broadcast frequencies. And
Yeah.
neural pathways, if you want to look at neurology, it's all there.
I
Uh
mean, my
yeah.
current belief, to be honest with you, is that consciousness itself is a frequency. And
Okay.
I think that our physical bodies are just receivers. Um,
Okay.
I kind of think that that's how an incarnation works, is that we attune our physical bodies when they're in the womb to our specific consciousness frequency,
Okay.
but we're not actually, you know, in the bodies. We're operating the bodies, but it's more like remote control, I think.
Mhm.
Like the old way of looking at it, that the soul is inside the body and then upon death you get released. I don't necessarily think it's like that. I don't know that we're ever actually trapped in the body. I think we're just projecting ourselves into it and we're living an experience through it. But
Mhm.
I think our consciousness is an eternal frequency that exists with or without the body. Um,
So why are we going into a fifth dimension? What's the meaning of this?
well, I think it's because the purpose of the third dimensional Earth is nearing its end, and the original intent of it has been hijacked. Like I said, so the ones that created it originally, that wanted it to serve more of a positive purpose, are like, well, we have to get everybody out of there because they're not being able to participate in the rest of the universe, and they've been stuck there long enough, and this has taken longer than we expected it to. So I think they want to help us rejoin the collective, rejoin
Mhm.
our family, so to speak, and be
Mhm.
released from, you could call it a mind prison or whatever. I mean, there's positive ways of looking at our experience here and negative ways of looking at it.
Mhm.
It's definitely been a mixture of both. I try not to go all the way into the full on negative views that we're here against our will and it's a prison and they're feeding off of it. I mean, some of that is true to a degree, but I also think a lot of us came here knowing what this place is of our own free will,
Right.
purposefully, so that we could assist other people, um, and let them know, hey, there is a way out of here. There is a
Yeah.
better way of doing this.
So I have a really broad stroke on this. um, Personally, what spirit or has told me, sources told me, but I look at it all different levels. So if you want to look at it biblically, um, there's good and evil, and good always prevails, and we want to avoid evil, and this is a negative and positive, masculine and feminine, and I'm not saying one is evil, one is good.
Right.
This is what is always existing
It's
everywhere,
binary.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we need to balance it out. It always needs to be balanced, just like hot air will move into a cool house, or hot house will move out. It always wants to create a neutrality and a balance, but we have to have both. You can't have one without the other. Then it wouldn't exist. So galactically, I think it's very egotistical of us to think that we're the only existing beings in all of the universes and all of the galaxies. And so my take, or what I've been told, is that galactically we are really out of balance, very much out
Right.
of balance. The negative or the masculine has to exist, or the negative, however you want to look at it. The feminine has to exist, um, or the positive, however you want to look at it. and they have to exist. They have to coexist as well, but one is completely out of balance from the other. The way that I explain it, electricity wise, it's like putting a 240 volt plug into a 110 volt, receptor. It's not good. Something's going to blow. It's not going to work.
Mhm. Right.
Right? So this is what's happening with us right now. And so we have to create this balance. So all of the negative has to come out. All of the positive has to come out. And they have to fight this out. I don't mean like war. I don't mean anything like that, but they have to battle this out until it becomes equal on both sides. And
Well,
once
and
that happens, and we're in harmony.
so here's the crazy thing. I know it seems like we're living through the worst times ever, but we're really not.
No,
Things in
no,
history were a lot worse. Lifetimes
yeah,
in history were a lot worse. People had to go through much more traumatic lifetimes just 100 years ago. And the
true.
difference is the reason why it seems so much worse, and it's causing us all this anxiety and trauma and PTSD, is because we're bombarded with images of it. So, like 100 years ago, you were only aware of what happened within a 5 mile radius of where you lived, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, most places didn't even have a newspaper. So, you might have got town gossip when you went in to get supplies, or if you had a restaurant or a post office or something like that, or a doctor. But,
Mhm.
for the most part, it was you and your family and your farm and what you were doing, and
Yeah.
that was it.
Right, you didn't know
But
people were starving in Ethiopia, or
you had no
there
idea
was
there
an
was a war
earthquake
going
in
on.
Egypt, or there was a
Right, you
war.
you didn't
Yeah,
know somebody robbed somebody else 3 days ago. You didn't know
yeah,
there was a car wreck that killed a family. You didn't know, like, none of that was in your mind. So,
yeah.
you might have physically been going through worse because, oh, your whole family just died of cholera, and you're the only one that survived. I mean, but we were better equipped to handle stuff like that back then because it was more focused on what we were going through personally. And
Mhm.
now we're trying to, like, mentally connect to the entire world all the time. And so,
It's an
you know,
addiction.
it's an addiction, yeah. And we're not being shown the positive. The positive that's happening in this world on a daily basis far
Oh,
outweighs the negative. I guarantee you that.
unbelievable. But nobody, why is it that our brains are addicted to trauma, drama, fear? Like, look at the movies out there. Look at the games out
Well,
there that people
I
play.
I think you
Everybody
you
eats
you
that
hit
up.
the nail on the head. It goes like, I know a post that you did recently on addiction. It talks about the brainstem, right? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that is our fight or flight syndrome. That is our reptilian brain, as they call it, from our days of survival, which were, kill or be killed, live or die, like eat or die, basically. Like, you were, everything was
survival.
in that survival mode.
Yeah.
And so our brains they still have that in us. And so the way our
Yeah.
brains are currently, designed, we focus more on things that are a threat. If something's
Brilliant.
not a threat, it's not going to kill us, so we don't focus on it. And
Right.
so media, unfortunately, instead of focusing on the positive, they want to make money, they want to get ratings, they want to sell things. So they
Oh,
know
yeah.
how to manipulate us, and they know that a fear-based response is going to stick in your mind far longer than a positive response.
Yeah. So, in case some people are thinking this is woo-woo, you can research this as well too. And this has been around for about 30 years at least. Major food chains, major food like like General Mills, like PepsiCo, they hire psychologists to to show them how to psychologically market their product with color and forms and wording so that we desire it or we want it more. And they're highly paid. and most of them do not want to lose one that's very good at what they do. You walk
Absolutely.
into a grocery store, it's completely designed for you to pick certain foods and buy certain foods, and that's all a grand
And
design.
and the crazy thing is even when you are like I'm totally aware of it. I've researched this stuff for a long time. I've been aware of it for a
I know,
long
and we
time.
still do it.
And yet there are things that I grew up
Guilty.
with as a child that I just cannot let go of because they still give me those feelings, you know?
Yep.
Like I know Coca-Cola is a horrible thing to put in my body. I know it's
Yep.
bad for me, and yet it's my one go-to for a comfort every freaking time. Like,
Yep.
"Ooh, Coca-Cola." It's just seeing the imagery of it, even
Well,
though I consciously know it was purposefully designed to engineer these feelings, I cannot stop it from causing the feelings. Like,
so this is my
it's
question then. Do we have to let go of all of these bad habits in order for us to move into 5D consciousness?
I don't
Or
know
is
that we do
yeah,
have to let go of them because I
yeah,
don't
I
think
don't
there's
know.
anything judging us. We got to let go of this concept of there's somebody being at the pearly gates that's going to judge everything that you've ever done and say yay or nay,
Mhm.
because that person that's judging us really is ourselves. Um,
Yep,
even the concept of Anubis weighing your heart in the afterlife, it's yourself. It's whether you think you're worthy or not. And so I think there are some people that could give up every single thing and be the most pious person on the planet, but because they're still so self judgmental, they wouldn't let themselves walk through the pearly gates. And then there's other people like, oh, I don't know, let's just toss out a name, like, a really recently rich
oh, Donald Trump?
person that yeah, maybe that guy. Yeah,
Bill
he would
Gates?
probably walk right through. I didn't do anything wrong. What are you talking
Oh,
about?
yeah. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay.
You know what I mean? Like he's got no self-judgment. He,
No,
he never thinks he's done anything wrong.
no,
So,
boom, I'm out of here.
yeah.
You're fired, you're fired, you're fired. He'd fire half the angels.
So I think it's not that there's somebody judging us and saying, "Oh, well, you ate meat too much, you drink too much sugar, you like." It's not that. It's that we need to be aware of it. Okay, so being aware of it is the first step, and then you're making a conscious choice, because if we're being manipulated into it and we're not aware of it, that's the dangerous part, because then
Right.
that's where hive mind comes in, or like mob mindset, where
Well,
we can get wrapped up in something.
yeah,
But if we're consciously aware, okay, I know this thing is trying to manipulate me, but I'm still going to weigh out the pros and cons. So, all right, so let's just take Coca Cola, for instance. All right, so on the one hand, I know too much sugar is bad for me, caffeine is probably not great. But in this given moment, if I drink this, what does the pros outweigh the cons? Is it going
right.
to make me feel better in the given moment, allow me to calm myself down, I regain my thoughts,
Yep,
and so you're making a conscious choice.
yep.
It's not just an automatic addicted mindset.
I think, and it's baby steps too. Like for
Right.
me, I make a conscious choice. I try. I'm guilty. I'm not perfect. The one that I am perfect at is dairy, though, and the only
Yeah.
reason is because dairy really affects me. If I eat dairy, I'm in pain for like five
Right.
to 6 weeks. My joints hurt. My hips hurt. My hands hurt. Like people call it arthritis. I've been diagnosed with it. I had arthritis as a kid, but if I don't eat dairy, I have no symptoms.
Right.
So, dairy, I'm very, very conscious of that. However, some of it is like it's just like the food, I call it the food footprint. I know that non-organic bananas are sprayed with a pesticide that is sprayed over the fields with an airplane while people are workers are farming are picking the bananas, and they're being injured, they're being hurt, they're 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 being steriled, and there's all kinds of terrible things that happen to these men. So I can't buy it. I cannot buy a non-organic banana because I know I'm contributing to the problem.
Right.
I know I can't change it, by just little old me
But
not
if you
buying
were in a
one. But
situation where, you needed something to eat, and the only
Oh, if
thing
I was
around was,
starving
yeah, like,
and it was there, what am I gonna do? Of course,
right.
right? But I have a choice.
I mean, you would make the choice, right? I'm
Yeah.
just saying but yeah, I agree with you. That's the kind of things that we need to be aware of. But
Like, but we're not, right? We don't wanna go that rabbit hole. Like, I have a friend that says innocence is bliss, and that's where she wants to stay.
right,
You know? But, sometimes I'm not sure. But I also I got this message from Source a while ago, and it even still is hard for me to conceptualize. And it said it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter that all of it is an illusion.
it's
Like
true.
all of this
Yeah,
mass killing and design of cows and pigs and
I
chickens
honestly
and
think the only
eggs.
thing that truly matters is getting out of it.
Yeah.
Because once we get out of it, we're going to realize none of it did matter because it is a simulation. Um,
So
it,
that's the 5D is getting
that's
out
the
of it.
5D. We're getting out of it. It's
Hmm.
it's you know it's because here's another way of looking at this reality, and I've considered this option too. Maybe this place was designed intentionally because it is the only place where we can come to experience all these atrocities in a
Yeah, I've heard
safe
that.
place, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why it doesn't matter because we're just coming here to experience it so we learn what not to do. So we learn how
Yeah.
not to be. Um, so if we did go out and create our own world, we wouldn't want to be this way. Um,
Yeah.
that's another potential that it's a school
I
for
think it's
gods.
yeah. Yeah, and well, this is a fun place to be. I mean,
Right.
this is heaven. I mean, Earth is beautiful. Earth is a beautiful, gorgeous playground. We're ruining it, but it really is designed to give us everything we need in a healthy way. We're destroying it by because through gluttony, you know. Um, but it's
Greed.
actually
Yeah.
a beautiful place to be. And when we raise our consciousness in a lifetime, uh, even you could do it through empathy. You can do it through observation. You don't have to acquire, a lot to raise your vibration of consciousness. When we do that, then we can come back and play with less suffering. We can come back
Right.
and choose where we're going to play and who we're going to play with. That's my understanding of it. And when we make poor decisions out of fear, everything's based out of fear. You can call it hate
Yeah.
or anger or frustration or
It's all fear
ignorance, but
based.
it's all fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we make a decision based out of that, and we all do. And the two best examples I've ever seen that's real. I know I won't probably acquire this in this lifetime. And one is a a TED talk that I'd watched, and I can't remember who she was, but she was a woman that lived in like Afghanistan, or I think it was Syria. I'm not sure where it was, but out in those third worlds. And the army was of this place was going around and capturing everybody and either killing them or enslaving them, putting them behind bars. And she was hiding, and her she happened to have one of the rare homes that had two bathrooms. Most of the homes were too poor, didn't have two bathrooms. And
Hmm.
her cousin or her uncle or something that was in the army put her in one of the bathrooms and took a big armoire and covered up the door so it looked like it was just up against the wall. And she was there for 3 months. And the army kept coming in. They kept coming in and they kept coming in. And she talks about her whole story and how terrified she was that she all she had was the water from the sink and the toilet. That's all she had the whole 3 months to keep her alive.
My
And
goodness.
the terror that she would talk about, I can't even imagine. Like, I think I'd try to kill myself. Like, she couldn't. And then it came to a point. She said it was about just over 2 months, where something in her brain and in her spirit just realized that there was nothing to fear except fear itself. She just had this awakening, And from that, the next several weeks or next few weeks after that, she had absolutely no fear. She had nothing but pure bliss and peace because she broke through that sort of barrier. And then she was here to
Right.
talk about it. She got rescued and she was here to talk about it. The other one are Buddhist monks. I mean, they filmed Buddhist monks sitting in 6 inches of snow and ice, meditating and creating such heat that it's like 3 feet circumference around them, melted snow and ice. They filmed Buddhist monk having brain surgery with no anesthetic because such a deep meditation that they can go into. So we are capable of this.
Yeah. I think that kind of goes back to some of the mystery school traditions that, well, even the story of Jesus,
Teresa
but
Ballard.
yeah, but the whole like going into the wilderness for 40 days.
Yeah.
There was an old mystery school tradition where they would take their members that were trying to join and put them in a completely dark room or a cave. First, they did it for 3 days, and then they brought them out into blindfolded, remove the blindfold, have them stare at the sun for a certain amount of minutes, and then put them back in the cave. Well,
Yep.
and then they would stay in there for the remainder of the 40 days.
Yep.
And the reason they did this is because it forces you, number one, it causes something to happen chemically within the brain because it causes
Hmm.
the pineal gland to produce something called super serotonin, basically, and melatonin. So the being in the darkness creates an abundance of melatonin. Then when you're blinded with the sunlight, it turns it into serotonin. And then you go back into the darkness and it reacclimates that into more
Oh,
melatonin.
wow.
But while you're in the darkness alone for 40 days, you're
Mm.
going to have to deal with every single fear you've ever had.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to integrate your shadow self completely in that
Yeah.
amount of time. Now, not all of them made it through that process. A lot of them probably only made it a few days or a week before
Get
they
me out of
had to
here.
get out of there. But
Yeah.
the ones that made it were the masters and the ones that would become like a Jesus or a Buddha or somebody, and probably in this lady's case, that experience to me seems like pretty much the same kind of an event,
Yeah.
to where you just get to this state of Zen because you finally realize there isn't really anything to fear. And I consciously try to have this conversation with myself all the time because I've had some personal experiences in my life that were, out of body. Some might say near death, even. Um, and because of those experiences, I can't say I'm afraid of death. So I'm always trying to rationalize where all my anxiety and fear is coming from. And it's more like I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid of dying. I'm
Yep. I think
afraid,
that's most people. Nobody wants to suffer.
right. And I'm afraid of leaving people behind. That's really my biggest fear
No.
is
Okay.
that I don't want to, you know, um, I don't want like, well, for in my case, like my dad, I would hate to leave him behind. Like
Yeah.
it's like I feel attached to the commitments I have made in life and the people that depend on me.
Yep.
So it's hard for me to want to just leave them in like not that I don't have faith that they could figure things out because they're very strong, but it's just like that part of me that's loving and caring doesn't want to leave them, you know.
Well,
Um
I had a conversation with Sorcy a few weeks ago, and I still giggle when I hear what they said. And they said that they just giggle at us at how hard we fight to stay alive, like how hard we fight to avoid death. They just
yeah.
think it's because to them they said to me, it's death is really you just fall asleep and you wake up and it's great over here. We're having a great time over here
And I've
because you
already
guys
been
try
over
so
there,
hard to avoid it.
and I know it's great over there, so what am I so afraid of? Yeah, because I had a personal experience that you would call a complete ego death, and I became one with the universe, the only way to describe it. Um, I can't
I've
remember
had that in
everything.
meditation.
Yeah, and you can't contain all of that knowledge when you come back,
No.
but you can remember the feeling. You can remember you experienced it, and you know it was real,
Mhm.
and all I remember is, like, at one point, every question I ever had been answered. Every scenario from any time or place or reality that I ever wanted to see, I had witnessed. And I just had this complete feeling of absolute contentment and love and safety come over me. And
Yeah.
then it was at that moment where I just had this thought of, where am I? And it was like as soon as I separated myself with the word I felt myself
Mm.
fall through a wormhole and back into my body.
Ah.
So it was like, okay, uh, so there's like you could be part of the all or you could be the individual, but
But you can't be both.
yeah, it's hard to be both at the same time, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
technically you are both at the same time, but
Oh, I know.
the piece of you that experiences the individual
The
has to
ego,
experience the separation because
the id.
that's the whole point of it. Um,
So,
yeah,
what are the what advice, let's break it down to 3 to 5 points of advice that
sure.
you and then I'll give mine that you would advise people to safely yet um as fast as possible at the same time move into a 5D consciousness.
Well, one thing we haven't really talked about is angels, and as you know, that is a huge part of my personal spiritual practice and belief structure. And I don't believe that angels are connected to any one specific religion. I think they're non-denominational, so to speak. Like they have been around and have always been around, and they'll help anybody. And almost every religion is connected to them in one way or another. Then they don't always call them angels, but
We'll have to talk about that in a next one because you're
yeah.
very well versed around angels.
But
So
if
you're
you
saying we could call upon
but
an angel.
they are there to help. They are there to assist, and they will help anybody at any time. But the one rule about an angel is you have to ask. So they're not allowed to just intervene unless we're
Mm.
specifically
And do you have
asking
to be
for them.
precise? Like I always say that with my clients, they'll be like, I just want to be happy. I go to, that's not enough.
Not necessarily. I mean, being precise helps, but being too precise could be unhelpful.
Exactly. Yeah. I want
Um,
$1,000,000. That's what will only thing that will make me happy. That's being a little too precise.
well, you know what? But even if you break that down and you say, okay, well, maybe having $1 million is okay, but don't say I only want $1 million if I win it in the scratch off ticket. Like,
Yeah.
don't close all the doors. Just say
Yeah.
I just want to be rich, and I don't care how it happens.
Yeah.
Like, just help me be wealthy. Help me be.
Well, wait a
And there's
minute.
a lot
No,
of
you don't want it to be because you've had an accident and lost your
well,
lower
angels would never
extremities
do
and you
that.
got paid off with $1,000,000. You
That
gotta be
is true. Okay, so in most of the practices that I have been in, when you're asking for something, you usually end it with harm to none. Like
yep, with
without
harm to
harming
none.
myself or my loved ones.
Yeah, or
Like
for the good of all.
right.
Right.
But to be honest with you, I don't think angels are going to do that.
Nope,
No,
they're
I'm
not
not
gonna
saying
give
that
you the
there aren't
lottery
spirits.
tickets. They
Well,
never
I'm
did it to
no, I
me.
mean I don't think they're going to harm somebody to make you rich. So
Oh, I see. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
but
so angels, what else?
so that's yeah. If you believe in them or are comfortable working with them, I highly encourage you to look into them. There's tons of resources on the internet,
Yep.
YouTube and whatever.
Yep.
Um, the one thing that I will point you in the direction of is the 72 angels. If you just look up 72 angels, you'll find a ton of resources. But that is the one breadcrumb I'll leave for you. Um, the other thing would be try to especially for those of us, if you're highly sensitive, you're most likely an empathic person and you're going to
Yeah.
be feeling a lot of things that are not your emotions. And so it's hard for us to decipher, like you were saying before, if you instantly start feeling something and you don't know where it's coming from because you haven't been thinking about anything negative, but all of a sudden you just feel anxious and overwhelmed, that's probably not coming from you. So you've got to learn to be aware of that and let it go. Just let it flow through you. Don't hang on to it, like you said. Don't say, "Oh, this is because of my whatever," or "This is because of that." Let it flow. Let it go. That's that's kind of my motto. Um, and I've tried to do that more and more over the last 2 years. Um, and the third thing is, don't focus on like, yes, there's negative and positive, absolutely. But I stay more positive, and I fully believe that we are very powerful beings, but we just need to believe it and allow ourselves to be powerful beings. And that is the trick, is to stay out of the fear while allowing what you want to take hold. But that's where working with angels comes in, because they're kind of like the rungs on the ladder. You may be doing pretty good, but ever so often you need a little extra help. So
Yeah.
they could be that little hand that comes down that helps pull you up one more rung, and then you can climb a little bit more on your own, you know.
Okay. I like it.
So they can definitely help us in integrating our shadow selves, because I think that's a huge issue right now, is that we're all trying to run away from our shadow selves. And you can't do that. It's like we said, there has to be positive, there has to be negative. Integration is the key to that. Now, that doesn't mean you can just say, "Oh, well, I'm integrating my shadow self, so it's okay if I'm a total asshole today." Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying it excuses bad behavior, but you have to be able to, kind of like you would a 3-year-old. If a 3-year-old hits his sister in the head because she took his candy bar, you don't hate the 3-year-old forever. You offer the 3-year-old compassion and love and understanding, and see where it's coming from, and let it understand that you still love it. Like, that's the way you have to treat your shadow side, and integrate it. Um, I don't like giving specific instructions on that, because everybody's consciousness is totally different, and you have to know what works best for you. But I can tell you this: trying to stay in love and light all the freaking time is not going to work for anybody.
Hmm.
Like, trying to just
Right.
totally
So,
ignore,
yeah.
you
So this
know,
is interesting because in my book, 101 Answers from the Universe, you can get on Amazon on page 95, question 80, does everyone have an angel or a guide? And the answer from source was everything and everyone does. However, not every angel, guide, or spirit has a person to report to or support. Everyone has access to many of them. There are 1 to 5 that will report to you exclusively. Often these spirit guides and or angels will be with you momentarily. New ones will come in and take their place. Much of this has to do with your personal evolution. When you are going through a challenging evolutionary process, when you are graduating from one dimension to another, at times this can be painful and difficult, and they are with you.
yep, I would agree with that.
Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those are just the ones that are naturally connected to you.
Yeah.
If you want to go down the path of more ceremonial magic practices with
Hmm.
angels,
Hmm.
there are definitely ways to work with an unlimited number of them for specific purposes.
And
Um,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead.
So I want to wrap this up. I think that if you're willing to come on again, Jay, we can talk about angels and how we can work with angels. I have to admit that I was never like big on that for a while, but I'm very experimental. So I'm like,
Right.
hey, I'm just going to experiment with it for fun. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So like lately I've been experimenting with multiple dimensions or parallel lives. So if I don't like a specific something that's happening in my life right now, I just imagine, like daydream when I'm going to sleep, the way that I would want it to, Holly in a parallel life doing having a different experience. And I'm telling you, like the next day, nothing huge, but something small will happen that actually says, wow. And I've done it more than once to make sure it wasn't a
For
coincidence.
sure.
So, for instance, I've got somebody in my life who's becoming distant, and I imagine that, we're close again and we're having this connection again and we're laughing. And the next day, they'll text me and say, "Oh, I miss you so much. I haven't talked to you in so long." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" Or and then I'll try it and it'll happen again and it happens
That's
again and it
absolutely
happens
the
again.
key.
It
Yeah.
works and it's just for fun, right? So if you want to experiment with angels and just imagine talk to an angel and just say or prayer, everybody's different
So
meditation.
the way I like to work with angels is like what you're talking about is absolutely true. And that is the key. Whether you're praying or you're asking or you're just trying to create stuff on your own, believing it as if it's already happened, imagining it as if it's already happened, speaking it out loud as if it's already happened. That is the key to changing your reality. Is resonating at the level of it has already occurred. Um, the what I like to do with angels though is that we can't our lives are not engineered to where we can just consciously be on and consciously creating all day every day because most of us have to work, we have responsibilities, we have things that are going on that's going to take our attention away from that. So where angels come in is you can kind of have them be your automatic creators. Like you say, all right, I am putting you in charge of this specific thing in my life. And no matter what happens, you're generating the energy and the intent for this to occur. And so
Mhm.
you kind of give each one of them a different charge so that you don't have to consciously be trying to do all of it yourself.
Yeah. And I think too, like some people will say to me, how come a law of attraction doesn't work? I've been thinking about this forever and it's not happening. And I think it's because your consciousness has to shift
Yeah.
in order for that to come into your life. You're not aligned with it consciously. So, and there's steps to take. You can't just start at the bottom of the step and jump to the top of
No.
the step. You can't skip
Like
steps.
no. 10 years ago, like I said, I was unemployed and nearly homeless and on food stamps. And I have worked over the last 10 years to now I'm making a decent living. I have a decent career. I'm doing
Mhm.
okay. But
Yeah.
it didn't come out of nowhere. And I'm not saying the angels did all of that. Obviously, I put in a heck of a lot of hard work to get where I'm at.
Yeah.
But they helped, they assisted, and they were my backup in
It's
times of crisis, you
it
know?
takes a village.
Right.
It
So
takes a
yeah, I mean,
village.
obviously, I've wanted to be, a millionaire my whole life, like all of us have, but I'm not there yet. But I'm definitely a lot closer than I was 10 years ago. So it's definitely a
Well,
process.
it is. You know what? Well, we'll talk off
Sure.
air if you're interested in coming back and talking about angels.
Yep.
That would be totally cool. I know you do angel readings or you do angel cards or something like that. And it's really, really cool. Maybe you could teach people how they could do it themselves. Um, But I wanna thank you because this information on solar flares, actually, I didn't know a lot of that. That blew me away. I'm gonna take a look closer at that. And 5D, I think we pretty much had the same perspective around it, but you had a lot of history knowledge that I don't have at all around that. So I found that really fascinating too. So I welcome everyone to share this with anybody that you know because we want to spread positivity, we want to spread love, we want to take away fear, abolish fear in our
For sure.
reality. And thanks a lot, Jay.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye bye. Bye, everyone. Namaste.